I'm going to demonstrate the process that I use to create a comic book using both freehand and Photoshop styles. This is a high-level view of each step in the process, not really a tutorial for Photoshop or shading or anything like that. So we're just going to kind of go over each step a little bit at a time. So the first thing I do, and I've already got this set up, is in Photoshop I create my panels for this comic page, and this happens to be page 20 of what I'm working on. So I just drew them all out. I used a grid just to make sure everything's even, and I've already got it written out exactly what it's going to look like. So I've printed out the panels onto just a plain sheet of paper, and I've actually gone ahead and sketched in some of the ideas that I have for placement of characters and exactly where their speech should be. I've written out a script beforehand, so this can be very, very rough and doesn't need to tell me a whole lot. In fact, as you'll see later, I won't even need to worry about the placement too much on the paper that I'm drawing, because I'm going to cut out each character, each little speech bubble will come in later. So this is just kind of a rough look at where things need to be. And the next step is to draw the pencil outlines of what we'll ink later. With the light penciling done, now we're ready to ink. And to do this, I use my favorite pen of all time, the Zebra Jimny Gel Rollerball Medium. I've been using these for several years. They have a nice thick point without being a marker, and it'll actually be pretty crucial in what I do with Photoshop. So now that the ink is done, it's time to color. And we're going to use Barrel Prismacolor colored pencils. Pretty simple process. So we're back in Photoshop. I've scanned in what I just drew and colored, and now we have to take each of these individual drawings and paste them into the main document. So I want to get as zoomed in as I can. And we'll use the magnetic lasso tool. Which does a pretty fine job of finding the lines, thanks in part to the pen that I use. So we'll copy this over to page 20. And I'm trying to keep pretty good track of the layer names. And I'm actually trying to do everything at once for a specific task. So I'm going to go back here. And this will be panel 2. And this is also why it wasn't really important to keep things in the exact position that they would need to be on the final page. Because obviously I'm just pulling them all apart separately, and I can paste them wherever I want. There we go. So we'll come back when that's done and go to the next step. Now we have everything copied over, and obviously we have some resizing to do because it doesn't match up. That's okay. I think what I'd rather do first is actually type out the text and make the speech bubbles, so we have a better idea of exactly what size to make them. And I actually already have some speech bubbles created, so I'm just going to drag it from a previous page. And then we'll just use free transform to shape it and move it where it needs to be. And we'll do that for all of these. Now we have all the text on the page, and so we have a better idea of what size we need everything to be. So we'll go ahead and start resizing each layer just by going to free transform, making sure we keep the perspective correct. And this is still a guess right here just because I'm going to be doing something a little different with this panel. Now for this particular page, for panel 1, we actually have a copy of a comic book cover that I need to insert. And in fact I need to actually do it twice, which won't make any sense, but I just have to do it. So, alright, I got the comic pages positioned where I need them pretty much. So the next step for each panel is to trim all of the parts of the drawings that are overlapping the panel edges. And that is fortunately pretty simple. We basically just trim around the edges, and it leaves our panel borders intact. So now that we have no more overlapping images on the panels, everything's pretty clean, but I'm doing a certain style on each of the panels. It depends on the setting, whatever scene I'm doing, whatever chapter. But for this particular one I have a background type that I'm using, with using bevel and emboss and a gradient, although usually it's a linear one. So we'll go through and I'll choose just random colors, random gradient types, and at that point it'll be just about done. So now we have the finished page. This is again page 20. It's one of about 45 to 50 that I anticipate being in this project. Obviously the goal wasn't to display a tremendous amount of artistic skill. If I had more time to do this, I'm doing a self-imposed deadline. I would pay more attention to the finer details and getting it a little bit more cleaned up, but I think for the purposes it'll do just fine.